Good evening, everyone. I want to talk for a brief minute about humans, organizations as human and social systems, part 2. We discussed some of this on Thursday, and I just wanted to kind of reiterate and elaborate a little bit on what we discussed. One of the legacies of human relations group studies comes from the translation of Max Weber. We talked about him briefly the other day. His work into English, which has been accomplished by and large by the 1950s. Here in this section we take a more sophisticated look at the rules, the application of rules and rule-bound systems selectively, the human aspect of leadership, the enforcement of rules selectively and informally and looking the other way. Supervisor could, for example, enforce the rules selectively, looking the other way, thereby winning loyalty and cooperation from the workers under him. Or, if conflicts develop between the supervisors and workers, the supervisor can amp up the enforcement of the rules, following them to a letter in a coercive manner. This is a more sophisticated, a more nuanced, a more individual sense of these formal organizations than we've had till now. With the application of Weber, who both provides a rational explanation on the one hand, you see his definition again in part 1 of a bureaucracy. It'll be foundation for our work here in the first part of the course. But he also provides a counterfactual, non-rational analysis. We have the ability to see how tension and cooperation have a non-formulaic human aspect, somewhere between the inevitable class conflict of Marxist perspective and the rather sanguine, shared, sunny cooperation of the Mayo school. Weber provides us with a variegated system of stratification that, while we typically in an intro class learn to apply to all of society, we can fruitfully apply to organizations. First, people can share, the classic Marxist social class position. Workers, in this analysis and in a couple of earlier readings we did, workers, it was workers versus managers. Managers were the proxies of owners, essentially. Okay? But there are additional ways in which people can be variously tied to unequal positions in a stratification system within an organization. One's social status is a key concept here. That's a position in terms of influence. It locates you not only in terms of social class, but in terms of a whole range of other characteristics. It identifies you as being similar to some and in a different position than others, and the position is inherently unequal when there's a difference in position. Managers are not just proxies for owners here, but can be differentiated by age. They can be differentiated by education. You can have managers with MBAs and some that didn't. This was often the case in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the 80s, when you had old guard managers who came up through the ranks versus people who came in college educated with MBAs. You can be differentiated by job tenure, that is, how long you've been in a job. So in our first piece, Melville Dalton lays bare the differentiation between managers in terms of social status. And this is a kind of a reiteration of what I was talking about the other day, a kind of review. Of course, the people in his study were all technically, officially managers. None were more equal. None had seniority over the others, a key aspect of bureaucracy. The line managers in Dalton's study, and he talks about line versus staff, though, had worked their way up through the company. They didn't have the business degrees and MBAs or engineering degrees that the staff officers had. They were older and they had longer job tenure, that is, time on the job, than did their counterparts, the staff managers. The staff managers were a new breed of post-war World War II college-educated emergent business engineers who were going to take the latest applications of the rational systems paradigm. It did not end with Mayo, but merely migrated or retreated into business schools, and teach these old line managers their new, improved way of working. They were going to go in and improve the system. So, of course, the tension between the groups was a microcosm of class and status differences in the bigger world: education, social class, age, job experience. And in addition, differential access to resources needed internally to do one's work, to supervise people, to meet quotas and so forth. These were all ways in which these groups were differentiated. And this, of course, resulted in the conflict between these two groups. In your second reading from Robert Jekyll's Moral Mazes, there was rampant internal politics between supervisors and subordinates within the management of a large corporation in the 1980s. Authority relationships were patrimonial. That's a word that Max Weber used to delineate pre-modern bureaucracies that operated on the personal fiat and whim of a monarch. Individuals moved ahead in the corporation by struggling to impress their boss and by forming cliques and alliances with peers. Arbitrary decisions and shuffling of personnel are common, and anxiety is pervasive. What happens if your boss falls out of favor and you're closely aligned with him? Then your fortunes are going to go down as well. This is far removed from as far removed from a rational assessment of the way a bureaucracy works as we've gotten, I think. Our third reading in this section was by Michael Burrovoy and his piece on making do in a factory. And it was his attempt to answer the question of why workers work so hard. And what he found was that workers made a game out of the work process as a way to pass the time and to make work more interesting. Workers built up a buffer or backlog of parts to compensate for the times when it was difficult to make quota, always making sure they never exceeded the quota by too much to avoid possible rate cuts by upper management. Supervisors colluded with workers in the process to keep things running smoothly, even though higher management would be opposed if they were to find out. Burrovoy terms this process manufacturing consent. Okay, that basically covers this rational systems, this organizations as human and social systems part 2. We're moving into another piece here. Our next set of reading begins with chapter 16 in part 5, rationality and non-rationality in organizational decision making. So now we're going to see how both the rational means and goals, plus this sort of systems maintenance, my own personal interest, human sort of relations, imperatives come together in cooperation and conflict in the decision-making process in an organization. We'll be discussing that a bit on Tuesday and Thursday coming up. Thanks a lot.